What is intimidation? Well, it is defined like this. It's to render timid. It is to inspire with fear. Love that definition. Intimidation is to inspire with fear. It is to discourage, coerce, or suppress using threats. Or this one here. It is the weapon of manipulation with the ammunition of fear. The constant amongst all of that is the idea is to roadblock you, to stop you, to keep you in a place of inertia instead of stepping forward. Now here's all that you need to know about intimidation in 4 very quick points. Number 1 is it's like thunder. It's all talk and no action. Now my kids often wake up during storms and they start to freak out when they hear the thunder. And they say, oh my goodness, it's so scary, there's a storm, it's all dark. And they start to freak out and we have to go in there and reassure them. And I say to them, thunder is nothing. It's just a noise. It's just volume. I don't speak to them about the lightning part, which could cause some damage, but we just focus on the thunder, and we make the story work for us. And I explain to them, it's just a noise. The enemy or the spirit of intimidation works just like that. In fact, in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, the enemy is described as a roaring lion. Not an attacking lion, not an empowered lion, a noisy, roaring lion. Intimidation is full of noise, but no action. Second thing you need to know is that it is a spirit. 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear or a spirit of timidity, but of power, love, and sound mind or self-control. Intimidation is a spiritual thing. In other words, positive thinking may be a tool to help, but it's not ultimately going to get to the heart of the issue. We have to recognize that this battle is not a personal battle. This battle is a spiritual one, as Ephesians tells us. Thirdly, is it only has the power that we surrender to it. We make intimidation powerful. In and of itself, it carries no power. How do we know this? Well, Matthew 28, Jesus said, all power, all authority has been given to me, except for a little bit that I gave to the spirit of intimidation. No. All authority in the heavens, in the spiritual realm, and in the natural realm has been given to me. And we know that we are in Christ, that we are sons and that we are daughters. And so as we hold to that authority and as we hold to that power, intimidation is rendered useless. And finally, the fruit of intimidation is confusion, discouragement, and frustration. If you're wanting to know, am I struggling with intimidation? Are you feeling confused? Are you feeling discouraged? Are you frustrated? Well, perhaps these things are indicating that the spirit of intimidation is having a field day. Now the good news is we're not going to stay in that place today. We're going to break through, amen? Fantastic. Now, the spirit of intimidation, it expresses itself through different faces. It has different weaponry, and it has different vulnerabilities. That's a tough word to pronounce. Different weak spots. But the Spirit is the same. Today we're going to look at 4 of these expressions of the spirit of intimidation from the Old Testament. We're going to talk about how to defeat each and every one of them. Are you ready? You got your seatbelts on? No, you don't, because we're going to go fearless and we're going to venture out and take on the spirit of intimidation. Amen? All right. Number 1 weapon, the expression of intimidation, is that it is here to make us perform. Have a look at the screen here. Who recognizes this character? Night at the Museum 2, it's our evil Pharaoh that's wanting to take over the modern world, even though he has a lisp and can't pronounce couscous. And I love that movie. It's one of my favourite characters. He entertains you. I think I could watch that one all through, every day of the week. But there is in the Bible the account of Pharaoh. There are a few pharaohs in the Bible, but the one I'm wanting to pour our attention on is the one that Moses went to combat. You see, Pharaoh was a hard man. He was a difficult man to work with. He was not open to new ideas. He wasn't open to creative input. He wasn't open to lessening the strings of slavery. And the people of Israel had been in slavery for 400 years. That's the equivalent of Australia being in slavery since 1616, which would be impossible because we weren't here then. But these people were in slavery. They wanted breakthrough. They wanted to get out of slavery. They were moaning. They were groaning to God. But Pharaoh was the man that stood in the middle of that room. He was the face of intimidation that said, I will not let your people go. And we know what happens. God raises up Moses. Moses encounters God at the burning bush. He says, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. God says, relax, Moses, I know you can't do it. It's me in you. And time and time again, as plague and plague after plague is unleashed on the people of Egypt, Pharaoh finally relents. But it's not before more slavery is added. In our lives, we recognize the spirit of intimidation at work if we discover that we are performing to meet the expectations of other people. It's very subtle because we are called to serve other people. We are called to serve God. We are called to build, to grow, to provide for our families. But if the motivation, if our master is Pharaoh, is a slave driver, and although we don't necessarily have a person that we call Pharaoh in our lives, but if we are doing it for the applaud of other people instead of to honour, worship and serve God himself, then we are actually operating under a spirit of intimidation. If you don't do well in life, if you don't perform, if you don't provide, if you don't step out of your comfort zone and do what I tell you to do, then you will be a failure in life. It's a spirit of intimidation demanding a performance from you and a performance from me. I remember Dora sharing with me about when she was in school and how she had a friend who, whenever they didn't perform in school, they didn't just get a speaking to about, hey, what went wrong? Are you okay? Let's work on getting some tuition. Let's develop your grades so that you don't ever get just an A again, but it will always be an A+. It wasn't quite that extreme, but so that you don't underperform again. No, they were brought home and they were beaten and they were caned and they were disciplined because they failed to perform. Now again, we may not see it as dramatic in our lives, but do we serve? Do we work? Do we perform for someone other than God himself? Or do we have a heart that is, God, I want to serve you, and I want to serve you alone? You see, Moses had to make this transition from serving Pharaoh and escaping into the wilderness to actually serving God and leading his whole people out of slavery into freedom. We need to recognize, number one, to take on the spirit of intimidation expressed through performance. Alright, number one is to perform, and number two is to conform. Who recognises this character here? I know, we don't know the name of him, but he's the North Korean guy that's real hard and harsh, that's right. He is a dictator. He is one that inflicts incredible pain and horrors on his people, on his own family. He has brought about executions. He's only been in power for about 5 years. He's 33 years old. And he has executed members of his own family, members of the previous regime, even the grandchildren of members of his family, for one reason. He wants power, and he wants the people of North Korea to conform to his power and his authority alone. Our world wants us to conform to its patterns. It wants us to be like everybody else. There is a status quo, which means it's keeping the existing state of affairs, particularly with regards to social or political issues. Whether you're in school, whether you're in university, whether you're in a workplace, whether you're in a family, whether you're watching TV, whether you're in a recreational environment, there is pressure to be like everybody else. But we're not the first generation to experience that. In fact, Nebuchadnezzar, he was a man, he was a dictator himself who wanted everyone to conform to him. In fact, he made this so dramatic that he built a gigantic statue of himself. He got all the people to come out and to look at the statue, and as they played their praise and worship music, Nebuchadnezzar, I give you my heart, I give you my soul. It's all about Nebuchadnezzar. All these great worship songs that he wrote about himself. And he demanded that everyone come before this great statue, kneel down and worship him. And everyone did, bar three people, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they stood there. They didn't draw attention to themselves. They didn't bring their protest signs. They didn't argue with him. But they refused to bow. They refuse to compromise. You see, in our world, there is a tension between relevance and compromise. Jesus was incredibly relevant to the people. Where was he found? While all the Pharisees and religious people were doing their thing, Jesus was with the sinners. He was with the people that needed to be reached. The sick, as he called them, he went to be with them. He was relevant. He was able to have a conversation with them without speaking in tongues, without telling them about Jesus every single moment. He was relevant. He was able to engage in conversation. But tell me one time that he compromised. Tell me one time that he became so relevant, or in the name of relevance, that he gave up himself, gave up his own values and belief systems. Young person in high school, university, TAFE, there's pressure to be like everybody else. And that pressure doesn't actually go away. I'm not saying there aren't young people on this side. It just seems to be more proportionate on this side. But young people, there is a pressure to conform, just to be like everyone else. But God hasn't called you to be like everyone else. Yes, He has called you to be relevant. Yes, He has called you to be able to have a great conversation with someone using normal Australian modern language. But He hasn't called you to compromise what you believe about God. He hasn't called you to deny your faith. He hasn't called you to suppress that which you hold dear to your heart. Older person, God hasn't called you to compromise your values so that you can be relevant to the next generation, so that you can engage with your children and your grandchildren. God has called you to be people of great valor, of great honor, of great integrity, that can have a normal conversation with a teenager as best as you possibly can. And we're still picking that up, but Pastor Matt can give us some lessons at the end of this. We are called to be relevant without compromising. Intimidation will say compromise and you become relevant. Jesus says, compromise and you become insignificant. So important that we remain relevant without compromising, not giving in to that spirit of intimidation. How do we take it on? Well, there are times that we actually just need to go in the fight and not back away from it. Not back down. Not with arrogance. Not with going out and getting into everybody's face and quoting scripture at them. Not holding placards and signs. And just saying, hey, this is what I believe. You can shoot me for it, but this is what I'm standing for. Alright, number 3 is our witch. I went to see Wicked last year. Was it this year? I can't remember. Everything kind of last year. Thanks. It was a great show. I really enjoyed that. And in the show, they portrayed her as very positive and all that type of thing. But when we come to the Bible's definition of a witch, we recognize that at its core is someone that wants to control, deceive, and manipulate. It's a dangerous person. So Pharaoh comes to make us perform, and Nebuchadnezzar comes to make us conform, then the witch comes to make us misinformed. Yes, they all rhyme. I took a lot of effort to make that happen, and that's why we don't have a 5th point. I ran out of conforming words. Now, a witch in the Bible that we recognize is is Jezebel. Jezebel she wasn't supposed to be in a position of great power. We had King Ahab, and King Ahab had fallen for this girl, for this witch. And she had decided that she was going to bring in her beliefs. She wasn't an Israeli, she wasn't a Hebrew, she didn't hold God even close to her heart. In fact, she rejected him outright, and she brought in her prophets of Baal, and she instilled her religion and enforced it amongst the people, misinforming them, saying that Baal is the way, the truth, and the life. Come to Baal, worship Baal. He is the one true God. She started to use her position of influence over Ahab and became a spokesperson for her belief system and communicated misinformation across the entire country. Now remember, we're not talking about flesh and blood here, we're talking about the spirit that was motivating her. Now Elijah was the great man of God called to not only take out the prophets of Baal, and he did that with dramatic style. He had everyone lined up, the 400 prophets of Baal, and he set up his altar as well, and the challenge was laid down. Whoever can get the altar to consume its offering is the true God. The 400 prophets of Baal, they spend the whole day, they prepare the bull, everything's ready to go. They start dancing, they start cutting themselves, they're doing all sorts of grotesque and ridiculous prayers to try and get the attention of their God. And what happens to their altar? Absolutely nothing. Then we have Elijah. Elijah doesn't just pray. He firstly pours out water upon it. He makes the job a little bit harder. He sets the challenge a little bit higher and prepares everything and prays one simple prayer. Bang! Fire comes down. The one true God is revealed. Who thinks you'd have a confidence boost at that point? I think I would have a great confidence boost at that point. I'd be feeling on top of the world, and I believe that he was. In fact, he went from there. They slaughtered the prophets of Baal. It was dramatic and gruesome and a horrible experience for them, but a great victory for God. Until the word from Jezebel comes to Elijah. And her words exactly are this: "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." Now, if I was Elijah, and I am full of boldness, and I'm full of courage, and I'm full of confidence at this point, I would like to think that my response would be, so be it. Look what happened to you. What did your God do? Let the gods deal with you ever so severely, and then you will become like one of these 400 prophets. Didn't you see my God? He came with fire. It was 1 to 400. Are you serious, Jezebel? You're honestly trying to threaten me? Can't you see that the favor and the protection and the blessing of God is on me? And he should have been full of boldness and full of confidence and resisted that spirit of intimidation, and in that day should have seen Jezebel dealt with, according to her own words, ever so severely, because God would have brought about a victory not just amongst the prophets, but amongst the source of misinformation and witchcraft across the country. But instead, Elijah bows to intimidation. He lets that word sink in, that lie become a part of his identity, and he starts to believe that he's going to die. He's only got 24 hours to live. I mean, logically thinking, come back at the 25th hour at least. If you're going to run away for a day. But you know a day later she said, if it's not by this time tomorrow, that God's going to deal with me ever so severely. But Elijah runs. He flees. He's influenced by intimidation. What's our lesson in this? Don't subscribe to the lies. We need to unsubscribe from a few lies on our own. You're never going to make it in life. You serious? You can't get up here and preach. Pete, you're the quiet kid in year 8. Don't you remember? I remember you. You're the kid that sat in the biggest group that you could, so you could hide at the back and not be pointed out. You were the kid that was bullied in primary school. You're the one that was quiet and timid, and now you think you can come up here and preach a message on intimidation? Yes, I do. Because I won't submit to a spirit of intimidation. I can see the deliverance that God has brought about in my life. What about you? What's intimidating? What are the lies? What are the things that are being spoken? You know, we see in our city, in our nation at the moment, this whole debate going around the Safer Schools curriculum, which is under the guise of an anti-bullying campaign. But there's a lot of lies and misinformation, untruths, and very destructive messages that are being sent out. Do we pull back from that? Do we allow that to come in? Or do we push back against it? And do we call it out and say, hang on a minute, that's not the truth. Hang on a minute, that's not true. Absolutely, as the Christian community, as the church, the bride of Christ, we stand against intimidation and bullying more than any other people group on the face of the earth. We stand for injustice. But we don't stand for lies and misinformation. Let's stand for it in a public setting, but also in a private setting. As the worship team come and join me, the final face of intimidation is this handsome guy here. We recognise that giant in the Bible. His name is? That's right, and all the kids workers shouted. Okay, well, that was all in kids' church. We'll give them a grace, yeah. Alright, we'll go with that. You know, we've got this song, kids' album at the moment, and there is this song that talks about David fighting Goliath, and it's all kids' music, and it kind of builds up, and it sounds like, a real great, momentum-building song, and then it gets to a part where it says that David came and he got the sword and he whack, 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 chopped off his head. I'm glad that the kids haven't connected the words with a visual at this point, because we're going to have to go through a bit of counselling when that happens. But when it comes to Goliath, we can't tolerate it. Pharaoh, he comes to make us perform. Nebuchadnezzar, the dictator, comes to make us conform. The witch comes to misinform us. And the giant, Goliath, he comes for one reason. He comes to deform us, or at least to threaten to deform us, to tear us apart. Have you ever been spoken to by God? He's put a passion, a dream, a desire, a challenge, a mission before you. And the first thing that you go after say, yes, God, wow, amazing, yes, one day I want to preach to hundreds of people. Yes, God, one day I want to give a great offering that's going to reach people, it's going to be sacrificial, it's going to cost me so much. Yes, God, I am willing to go where you send me. God, I'm willing to speak to that person that doesn't know you. Lord, I'm willing to take up that study even though I feel like I don't have a passion for it. Yes, God, I will do it. And then Goliath comes. And he threatens to rip you apart. And he's not talking about poetic language here. It's not figurative. He is saying that he wants to tear you to pieces, to rip you to shreds. This is going to destroy you. You know, I was at the leaders' bench, like I mentioned, and over the offering night, I was really personally challenged to give an amount that I wasn't comfortable with giving. It didn't fit in the budget. And I mean, God, really, you should be aware of budgets. I mean, I put great wisdom and effort into making sure that my budgets work, and here you are messing it all about. And I really felt God challenge and speak to me and actually Dora as well, the same amount for each night. I said, God, okay, we trust. And the moment that we said that, the moment I said that at least, Dora's all holy and she has no trouble being generous, but I'm struggling inside and I'm doing the offering teaching as well. And so I'm wrestling inside. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, you got bills to pay, Pete. Yeah, but you got a mortgage. Yes, but you've got kids' fees coming up this week. Yes, but you're planning for a Europe trip next year. Planning ahead, budgeting well in advance. Where we've got things to pay, things to invest in. We can't afford this sort of money. What's the enemy trying to do? Using intimidation to say you can't afford to follow God. You can't afford to be obedient. This is going to cost you your family. This is going to cost you your relationship. This is going to cost you your time and your money. This is going to cripple you. But can I tell you something? God is a God of risk. God is a God of faith. And I believe that this morning that He is calling us to stand in faith. In fact, let's stand up in this moment.